Our best chance of preventing war is to put hard power in Xi Jinping's path. And so I think these visits are critical to giving British politicians, American politicians, a sense of what we need to do to enhance deterrence in the near term, because none of us want to confront a war with China in the near term. We want to deter and prevent a war before it's too late.
Congressman, you said the greatest threat to the United States is the Chinese Communist Party. I wonder how big a threat you think it is to the UK.
I think given our shared values, it is the greatest threat posed to the UK as well. I mean, the CCP is the enemy of freedom wherever it exists. And increasingly, I'm persuaded that the model of techno-totalitarian control that the CCP is perfecting within its own borders is not going to stay confined within those borders. And particularly if you sort of examine the attempts at projecting global influence through the Belt and Road Initiative, the attempts to diminish the influence that America and our allies have around the world. I think increasingly I view this as a global competition and an ideological competition. So it's important that the free world stay united. It's important particularly that America stay on the same page with our closest allies, foremost among them the UK and Australia.
I'm sure some of the MPs you've been meeting may have said when he was running to be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister last year, Rishi Sunak said China was the biggest long-term threat to Britain. There's been a bit of prevarication about some of the language. Do you think the government's living up to that rhetoric from Rishi Sunak last summer?
Well, that's what we're here to understand. We're going to be meeting with the defense minister today. We'll understand the latest defense review. We just really want to explore in candid conversations with our friends and allies what we can do to better enhance cooperation between America and the UK. What are the lessons learned we can share? And I think within the AUKUS framework, there's a real opportunity to enhance short-term technological collaboration between America and the UK. That means in America, we actually need to break down some barriers to cooperation. Traditionally, something called ITAR has been a roadblock for us cooperating more closely. This is international trafficking and arms regulation. So the more we're aligned in terms of our security procedures, the better opportunity we have to break down those roadblocks and enhance cooperation. The language matters, whether we call the CCP a threat or an epoch-defining systems challenge was, I think, the phrase I heard most recently. But we just want to make sure that we have a clear-eyed assessment of what we're up against in the CCP, and that we're not allowing the CCP to corrupt and coerce the financial industry, our business community, some of our domestic institutions. And so we're here to have that conversation with our allies and share best practices. And hopefully we'll emerge from this weekend with a clear agenda for what we can do to get on the same page when it comes to pushing back against CCP aggression.
You've talked about the threat to Taiwan posed by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Do you welcome former British Prime Minister Liz Truss visiting there this week?
I do. I think the more we have visits between legislators and former legislators in both our countries, the better we'll be able to help Taiwan defend itself. I myself was in Taiwan in February, and I know it sounds almost silly and simplistic, but going there gives you just a basic appreciation for the geography and how, on the one hand, given that Taiwan is an island, it's a difficult military problem for the PLA to solve. On the other hand, the bad news is it's an island, and therefore it's very difficult to resupply an island, in contrast to Ukraine, where you can flow assistance through land borders. I think the lesson is therefore that we need to surge hard power west of the international date line and pre-position it throughout the first island chain and on Taiwan itself before it's too late. Our best chance of preventing war is to put hard power in Xi Jinping's path. And so I think these visits are critical to giving British politicians, American politicians, a sense of what we need to do to enhance deterrence in the near term, because none of us want to confront a war with China in the near term. We want to deter and prevent a war before it's too late.
I know there was some controversy when Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan last year. Would you like to see current?
Yes, there was some controversy. I mean, choose the speaker. There's no controversy when I go, because I'm such a low-ranking member of Congress.
Well, I was wondering that because there's been a concern that maybe if British backbench MPs go to Taiwan, that's one thing. A former prime minister going is clearly more high profile and therefore more controversial. I just wondered if you thought actually you'd like to see more senior American politicians, maybe members of the Biden administration, or maybe follow our lead and send a former president. Would that be the sort of thing you'd like to see?
Well, I have no problem with members of Congress going. I actually supported Speaker Pelosi. I mean, I'm a Republican. I supported her trip to Taiwan. I think the important thing is that we just don't allow ourselves to be intimidated and coerced by the CCP. I mean, the CCP threw a fit when President Tsai came and transited the United States and met with us, members of the committee, and the current Speaker of the House, McCarthy, out in California. And we just don't want to allow ourselves to give in to that form of intimidation and coercion. And if you sort of back down for fear of upsetting the CCP, you're truly feeding the crocodile, hoping that it will eat you last. And so this is what they try and do. It's a form of political warfare, information warfare, and we need to stand firm in the face of that coercion.
I just wanted to ask you about one of the other big threats, obviously, that the world is facing right now. Earlier this week, I spoke to Sir Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6, and looking at the threats around the world, he said that Russia is weather and China is climate change in terms of the longer-term threat. But when it comes to Russia, are you concerned that China could, as this conflict in the invasion of Ukraine drags on, that China could intervene in some way and tip the war in Russia's favor?
I am concerned. I view these problem sets as linked. I mean, I think that we have to understand that the no limits partnership between Putin and Xi is deeper than initially we thought. That increasingly, Putin is Xi's junior partner in a new Cold War that they've launched against the West. He is, to quote my good friend Tom Tugendhat, Xi's tethered goat in Europe, his agent of chaos. And so an attempt to sort of de-link these problem sets, I think, would be geopolitically myopic. And so we have to consider them in tandem. I think we need to continue to provide lethal assistance to the Ukrainians. I praise the government here in the UK for its forward-leaning posture with respect to the UK, and we need to make sure that we're also learning the right lessons from the failure of deterrence in Ukraine and applying those lessons to the Indo-Pacific so we don't see a similar failure of deterrence across the Taiwan Strait.